The 7-week New York criminal trial is over. Former President Donald Trump has been found guilty on all 34 charges against him, and he is now able to campaign freely until July 11th, when he will be sentenced. That's exactly 4 days before he is officially nominated at the party's convention in Milwaukee. As a felon, Trump cannot own a firearm or serve in a jury, but he can vote for himself, as he can run and be elected president. But we are clearly in uncharted territory, and it will be some time before we can fully see the impact of the conviction. Our new CBS News poll finds that 57% of Americans think the jury reached the right verdict, with virtually the same share, 56%, saying he received a fair trial. As more evidence of the partisan split in America, 96% of Democrats said the guilty verdict was the right one. So did 56% of independents. But 8 in 10 Republicans say the verdict was the wrong one and that the trial was not fair. Finally, half think that Trump is not fit to be president now that he's convicted, with 40% saying he is and 8% unsure. What you just heard Trump say about the case coming from Washington is not true. Charges in this case were brought by the Manhattan District Attorney. It is a state case, which means an appeal would not automatically go to the Supreme Court. For analysis and context, we want to bring in our chief campaign and elections correspondent, Robert Costa, who covers Trump and the entire trial for us in New York, and our chief legal correspondent, Jan Crawford, who has been covering the Supreme Court for decades. But Jan, nothing like this ever before. Jan, can you help us to understand? Trump said he will try to appeal this conviction. What is the next step?
Well, I mean, as he said, this is a long way from over, but there is, I think, zero chance this is going to be overturned before November. And the road ahead for Trump on appeal doesn't look too good either. As for timing, he's got 30 days to file what's called a notice of appeal. That's procedural. That could then start the process through the New York court state system, which could take over a year. Now, you said, as you pointed out in the intro, his supporters have been kind of throwing around the Supreme Court should get involved, the Supreme Court this. But you have to go through, when you're challenging a criminal conviction, the state court system first. Then he would turn to try to get the Supreme Court to take the case by raising constitutional issues. As for the appeal itself that he'll try to file, the lawyers throughout the trial, I think, were laying the groundwork for possible issues from start to finish. I mean, starting with the venue in heavily Democratic New York, the indictment, the charges themselves, a pretty novel legal theory, bringing in federal election law to a state case. He's going to talk about the evidence that was allowed or not allowed. He could talk about the jury instructions and certain components of that, even attacking the impartiality of the judge himself. But that is a very tough road to hoe. He's got to show this is clear, reversible error. That is very difficult to do on any kind of appeal. And so, I mean, that's why people say, Bob, if you're ever in trouble, spend your money on a good trial lawyer, because once you get into the appeals process, the odds are not good, and not good for Donald Trump here.
Bob, the political impact here, obviously, we're in the early stages, but we know that Laura Trump, who's chair of the RNC, said on another network this morning they had raised $70 million in 48 hours. Is this only helpful?
It's helpful in terms of raising money, but for former President Trump, there is still a logistical nightmare on the horizon. When I spoke to his lawyer, Todd Blanche, he didn't rule out the possibility that Trump could be in jail during the Republican National Convention. When sentencing happens on July 11th, there's an expectation he could be put on probation. But this was a tense trial. I was there for 7 weeks. When you sat inside that court, at times the judge cleared the courtroom because he was so frustrated with the defense and one of the witnesses that was being called. Trump violated the gag order multiple times. So Republicans, the top Republicans in this country, are privately telling me they're not ruling out the possibility that Trump could be in prison when he accepts the nomination. There's a real concern that some traditional Republicans, suburban Republicans, might look at someone being called a convicted felon and say, I really can't go there, even as it motivates so many of Trump's core supporters.
But Jan, I mean, from all the research we've done, it seems like legal experts do not believe that there will
No,
be
not
jail
in this
time?
kind of case. Not in this kind of
Is
case.
that just a
First-time
political talking
offender, his
point?
age. I think it would be pretty shocking to most people who follow the New York court system that he would get jail time for this.
And that's not just because of Secret
Who he
Service
is.
detail
No,
or
it's,
who he is.
if he's treated like other defendants facing this similar charge. Again, also because of his age, he would be a first-time offender, and the charge itself is somewhat unusual, bringing in that federal election law. So typically in these kind of cases, you would have other charges, fraud charges, that could then carry jail time. So that makes this case different as well. It's just this one issue.
But he does now have a criminal record. And there are 3 other criminal cases. Just to remind people, in the federal level, the special counsel has the 2, one related to national security and mishandling classified information, the other trying to change the outcome of the 2020 election, and then there's the Georgia case as well. When will the Supreme Court make a decision on whether Mr. Trump will face charges and trial ultimately for these federal cases?
Well, of course, Trump has said he's absolutely immune from prosecution. He lost that argument in every court that is first considered. I think he's going to lose that in the Supreme Court, that he's absolutely immune. But this court does seem to think, like on the civil side, there may be some immunity. And so they're working on that decision now. We expect it by the end of June. They have agreed to expedite this case. This case, if it were on the normal course of business, would come sometime in the fall or winter. So Jack Smith, the special counsel, asked for a decision sometime this term. He is going to get that. The question now is whether or not he will then have time, if this case has to go back to the lower court and kind of figure out what immunity Trump does have, whether he will have time to have a trial before November. But I think this verdict does lessen the pressure on the Supreme Court and on Jack Smith to get that conviction. There is a conviction now already, and it's not going to be overturned by November.
Interesting point. Bob, quickly, our polling also shows 85% of Republicans feel loyalty to Trump is either very or somewhat important. How's that impacting the campaign?
People close to former President Trump tell me that he is watching very closely who's on television defending him, who's going out there and really speaking out and saying Trump did not deserve to be found guilty, who is going to rally to his side at a crisis moment. Inside the Trump campaign, this is seen a lot like the Access Hollywood moment in October 2016, which was involved in a sense with why this trial unfolded. And they're saying, if you're not out for Trump right now, good luck trying to get a spot in this administration should he win.
Great analysis and insight from both of you. Thank you. And Jan, you got a busy June ahead of you. We'll see more of you, I'm sure.
Buckle your seatbelt.